Hi, my name's Nathan Hayhurst, and this is my EPQ presentation on how I completed an Olympic distance triathlon from scratch. I started my project off in October with a personal audit to explore my interests and areas I could conduct a project in. I continued this process with mind maps, exploring debating, sport, video games, and engineering as possible project subjects. Through further exploration matrices and a pros and cons table, I decided on a sports-based project, specifically focusing on triathlon. I felt this had lots of opportunity for novel skills development and would be an area I would enjoy. I felt I would enjoy it because sport is important to me, and I had recently fallen out of love with some endurance sport and was therefore looking for a way back in. I continued my project choice by doing some basic research about different distances of triathlon, briefly considering and discarding Ironman distance in favour of doing a shorter Olympic distance. My aims going into the project included completing the final race, doing it in such a way that I wasn't burnt out and sick of triathlon by the end of it, and integrating science into my research to fit more with my future progression plans. Over the course of the project, I needed ways to plan and log the work I did on my EPQ. For the main part of this, I used a bi-weekly diary to track my progress, in addition to different to-do lists and checklists. I also completed a full project breakdown early on to explore the different facets of the project and refer back to when I needed direction. At the beginning, I wrote EPQ into my weekly timetable to make sure I stayed consistent and didn't fall behind. Through the project, I also created different timelines to give myself an idea of scale and to create a rough schedule I could stick to keep my project on track. For my first timeline, I created a colourful time tree on Canva, which looked aesthetic and had some good goals, but ultimately didn't work for time management. I learned from this, and for my next two timelines, I used Excel, with Gantt charts and critical path charts to give me a more rigid structure to stick to. The type of planning that I found most useful was short term. I'm not usually so good at long schedules, so making 1 day or 1 week plans, such as the ones I made before my races, helped me stay focused on the goal, and these, in addition to my prioritization matrices, were central to my progress. Over most of the rest of the project, I continued to research. I love this part because as a triathlon newbie, there were massive amounts to learn, from all the different distances of triathlon, to the tech and innovation used to drive speed gains, to the way triathletes are trained to optimize fitness over 3 combined disciplines. I used a large range of sources, from websites to medical studies, to blogs to journals to product reviews. This range made my project very well balanced and greatly improved my note-taking skills over a variety of sources. This included examples like aerodynamics research leading directly to a better bike split, or active recovery research leading to a more sustainable training load. This increase in skill also saw a big change in the quality of my research from the start of my project to the end. At the start of the project, my sources were lacking quality and had not been chosen rigorously. My conclusions were simplistic and limited in detailed analysis, meaning I didn't extract much value from the sources. However, by the end of the project, I ended up picking my sources much more critically instead of just going for the first result. I also cross-referenced these sources, often referring to multiple different studies or sites. This led to much higher quality of analysis and therefore much more value extracted, which helped to drive meaningful project momentum. When the project was finished, I ended up with just over 40 different pieces of research. I logged the sources for these in my source tracker, evaluating each one based on currency, relevance to the project, authority of the source, the accuracy of the information, and the original purpose of the source. I often completed these before my research to make sure each source was well suited. I also logged my final sources in a Harvard-style bibliography. For my project, I wanted to complete some direct interview-style primary research, both to develop my interviewing skills and to hopefully gain some expertise and insight from someone already skilled. I initially tried to interview Alex Yee, the British reigning Olympic triathlon champion, through a tenuous connection from a friend. However, this fell through, so I interviewed one of my teachers, a multiple-time Ironman. The informality of this interview turned out to be more helpful to the premature stages of my project than expert advice would have been. She informed me on nutrition advice, training methods, her favourite race day rituals and routines, how best to approach the sport as a newbie, kit acquisition, and more. I would have liked to interview more athletes, considering it is a very individual sport, potentially someone my own age or a coach. To aid my development, I completed an interim half-distance race for the sake of racing experience and evaluative processes. This race went well and allowed me to test race on the course the final Olympic would be held on, without as much pressure. I managed to learn a huge amount from the experience and to boost my hardcore development, such as race day prep, pacing, and transition skills. I came out with a list of takeaways to hopefully maximise my final race performance. These takeaways aided me hugely for the final Olympic distance race, allowing me insights into the way the course functioned that I wouldn't have had time to figure out otherwise, such as the abnormal circulation patterns on the bike course. I also came into it better prepped, spending more time tuning my kit beforehand, allowing me to come away with a faster bike segment and swim segment, thanks to the practice necessitated by the sprint race. After this, I completed a final evaluation to sum up my progression. Throughout the project, I logged my skills development in my evidence log. For each skill, I had an individual log, complete with evidence trackers for each entry. I drew this evidence from across the project, focusing on hard skills like the transitions between sports and soft skills like digital literacy. In addition, I completed 3 skills audits to track how my skills were improving. My evaluation section was invaluable to the project because it allowed for such stark improvement. For example, the evaluation of my first timeline allowed me to realise that it wasn't as useful as it could have been, leading to the next 2 being much more functional. I also evaluated both races, all my different kit purchases, my skills logs and my training approaches. I logged the problems that I experienced throughout the project in my evaluation section, together with the solutions that worked and those that didn't. Once my project was finished, I wrote up my whole project evaluation in my PPR, together with the evidence locations for all the components of the project. I also wrote out a commentary to summarise the process and path my project took, how I achieved the assessment objectives and my own objectives. To summarise, I came into this project with goals of developing transferable soft skills for later in life, gaining an increased sporting confidence and enthusiasm, and exploring science-based sporting research. I feel I achieved these goals to the best of my ability, despite weaknesses such as poor time management and procrastination. The strengths that drove the project's completion included a good training ethic, strong research blocks, and useful evaluations. From this project, I'm taking away improved problem solving and evaluative skills, better independence, experience in formal research, and superior project management skills. Thank you for listening. If you have time, please fill out my feedback form with the link below.